Hi, this is Wojtek again, and today we are recording another video about Jehovah Witnesses. And today video I would like to focus on 10 very easy questions for to answer by Jehovah Witnesses. So if you are watching me, Jehovah Witnesses, you who are active in your congregation, you are believers in Jehovah, you are members of Jehovah Witnesses Watchtower organization. Those questions are for you, so you can think about them and answer to yourself. Because they can benefit you if you have answers for those questions. So here we go. Here's the first question. But before the question, maybe a little background. Because we know that in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. This is what first book of the Bible, Genesis, in the very first chapter, in the very first verse, tells us that in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. And from that verse we learn also that byproduct of this creation was the beginning. And the beginning is nothing else but beginning of time, which is the very first second of this creation. And from that moment on, the seconds started to tick and time started to run. So we learn from this very first verse that in the beginning, which is the very first second of the creation, God created heaven and earth and also the time. Now, in the Gospel of John, in the first chapter, in the third verse, we learn that Jesus Christ created everything, and that without him nothing was created. So he created everything, which means that Jesus created time. And we know also that only God is eternal, which means that he is without beginning and without end, because he is outside of time. Before time was created, God existed, so he's outside of time. He's eternal in eternity. So since Jesus created time, that means that Jesus is also outside of time. That means Jesus Christ is eternal. So now in this point, I have a question for you, Jehovah Witnesses. And the question is, the question number one, who is Jesus if there is nobody besides God who is eternal? That was first question for you to answer, and we have 10 questions for you today. The second question, the background for this question is in Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4, as well as in Isaiah 43 verse 10. In both of those verses, Deuteronomy 6:4 and Isaiah 43:10, we learn that there is only one God and there is no other true God besides him. And we know that every other God is a God, is a false God. There's only one true God. And now we also know that a New World Translation, the Jehovah Witnesses translation of the Bible, in the Gospel of John, in the first chapter, in the first verse, calls Jesus Christ a God with small g. So the question number two I have for you, Jehovah Witnesses, is, what kind of God is Jesus? Is he a true God or a false God? Since there is only one true God, what kind of God is Jesus? Let's go to question number 3. We know that since Watchtower in the book Reasoning, this is the book Reasoning from the Scripture. This is like a manual for Jehovah Witnesses to witness to unbelievers. On a page 200, in the chapter that is titled Jehovah Witnesses, on the page 200 under point 7, under title Death, we find out that the teaching of Watchtower is that soul of man ceases to exist or stops to exist at the moment of his death, and there's no continuation of the existence of the spiritual part of man, because Jehovah Witnesses teach that man doesn't have spiritual part. So at his death, man just stops to exist, ceases to exist. And in this we know that in this book we find out that God at the moment of that God will recreate man at the future time, at the resurrection time, will recreate man out of his memory. So man stops to exist, but in future time God will recreate man out of his memory. So the question number 3 for you, Jehovah Witnesses, I have this. Why should you care for what is going to happen to your copy or to the clone of you? Why should you care? It won't be you. You stopped to exist. It will be new you. Question number 4. Question number 4 is, Watchtower teaches also from this book, Reasoning from the Scripture, on a page 218, in a paragraph that is right here, page 218, in a paragraph that is called, Is Jesus Christ the same person as Michael the Archangel? And we find out that Jehovah Witnesses teach that Michael Archangel and Jesus Christ is one and the same person. But if we go to scriptures, actually we're going to use newer translation, and we go to Daniel, we go to book of Daniel 10 and verse 13, we read this. Look, Michael, one of the foremost princesses, came to help me. Michael, one of the foremost princesses, came to help me. What that means is that there is few those princesses. That means that Michael is not the only one. That means there is few like him, the foremost princesses, which makes him not unique. And we know Jesus Christ is unique, a one and only. So since Michael the Archangel is not the one and only, he's one of many, the question I have for you, the question number 4 is this. Where in the Bible any of the angels any of the angels is called God or a God with small g, as supposedly Jesus was called in John 1:1. And when he's called God, that it still makes him not a false God. So which angel is called God, still being not a false God? Since we know all the gods besides the God are false gods. So this is something for you to think also. And now let's go to next question, the question number 5. The question number 5 is this. The background to that question is this. The Watchtower teaches that Charles Russell, right? Charles Taze Russell, the founder of this organization, was chosen by God to teach the truth. And we have this book right here. This is the book Creation. This is the book printed in 1927 and written by J.F. Rutherford, the second president of Watchtower organization. And on a page 121, but this is the older version, the earliest version would be 131. So 131, but this one is on 121. We read this: because it was the Lord's due time to restore these truths, he used Charles Taze Russell to write and publish books known as Studies in the Scriptures, by which the great fundamental truths of the divine plan are clarified. Which means that Charles Russell was appointed by God, chosen by God to give the truth to the organization, to explain the truth. So since we know that, we find out also in the book Time is at Hand. Time is at Hand, which is the book, one of those 6 books that Charles Russell wrote, those studying the Bibles, the scripture studies, right? Studies in the Scripture. This is the book number 2. The time is at hand, and we learn that on a page 79, as well as on a page 101, we learn that Charles Russell predicted the second presence of Christ was in 1874, and that in 1914 will be the end of this world, the system, and the conclusion of it will be the Battle of Armageddon. So this is the book that tells us this truth that is revealed to us by chosen by God Charles Russell. Russell used in this book, in those paragraphs that on page 79 and 101, he used a date of the fall of Jerusalem, as well like as a removal of the last king Zedekiah by the Babylon Nebuchadnezzar. He used this year of this fall of Jerusalem, which was 607 BC. In 607 BC, Jerusalem fell, and King Zedekiah was removed by Nebuchadnezzar. Then later, after this predictions of this 1914 end of the world didn't happen, the Watchtower made another prediction made several predictions, but we're just going to bring one just as a very good example. And this is this was there's many publications. I'm just showing one just to show you, but there's many to back up what I'm just saying here. They made a prediction. Watchtower made prediction of end of the world instead of 1914. That is going to be in 1975. And we have here Watchtower magazine. This is about year from 1968. So in 1968, in August 15, 1968, on a page 494, we find this very nice article which tells us that the end of the world will be in 1975. But what's very interesting here, I'm trying to get to, is that they also use this date, 607 BC, the fall of Jerusalem and removal of King Zedekiah, as a base to figure out those dates. Same way as Charles Russell did. He used this as a base for figuring out the, I think there was a period 2,520 years from that date where the end should be, and they do pretty much the same thing, using the 607 BC as a base for their calculations. And so the question number 5 for you Jehovah Witnesses, I have this: why Watchtower used year 607 BC as a date of removal of King Zedekiah and the fall of Jerusalem, when historical facts and an encyclopedia will tell us that the fall of Jerusalem was in 587 BC. That's just Wikipedia. Look at this. Wikipedia tells you the same. Siege of Jerusalem, 587. Go to any encyclopedia. So the question is, why they did 607 BC when the true date is 587 BC? That's a question, interesting question to answer. The next question, number 6, would be, the Watchtower teaches that since you are not part of the anointed 144,000, you are not in the new covenant with God. And to prove that, and I know this is widely taught by the Watchtower, that only 144,000 are part of the covenant, and the flock, the great crowd, is outside of this covenant. And we can find this as one of those many places we can find about this. I'm gonna bring one, and this is from Watchtower 1979, April 1st, on a page 31. We have these questions from the readers and the answers from the publishers, and we read this. The question is Jesus the mediator only for the anointed Christians? And the answer is, just end of this answer, we read, the new covenant will terminate with glorification of the remnant who are today in the covenant, mediated by Christ. The great crowd or other sheep that is forming today is not in the new covenant. So the question I have for you, since you are not in the new covenant, here's the question. Question number 6. How do you expect to be forgiven and accepted by God since you are not a part of the new covenant? You are not even killing animals in offering for sins as Jews did in the time of the Old Testament. You are not going to be accepted by God because you are not in the new covenant. So the question is, how do you expect to be accepted and forgiven? And the question number 7 is this. Watchtower teaches that truth gets progressively brighter. And the new brighter light is shown to the governing body every time the new light comes. The governing body will receive this light, and then the only governing body who is the only channel of communication of the truth between God and the organization. So when governing body receives this new light of the truth, brighter truth, then the truth is revealed more fully, and the governing body gives this truth to the flock, to the organization. So, knowing all this, there's a little fact. Long time ago, in 1918, a new light came to Mr. J.F. Rutherford, who was the second president of Watchtower organization. And the truth was revealed and then was taught for 77 years or even more than that. And the truth was told that the generation that saw the events of 1914 will not die before they will see the end of the world, the end of the system. So for over 77 years they were teaching this truth, because it was bright light that came to J.F. Rutherford, who was the channel between God and the organization. So God enlightened him, he received the truth, and he revealed this truth to the organization, and then they were teaching this truth for over 77 years. And it all started with pretty much a little before this, but that was one of the very first publications. This is called Millions Now Living Will Never Die. This is a little booklet, very old, very cheap paper, so it's pretty bad shape. But this is the whole book that gives this prediction and teaches that millions now living will never die. Here we go. We can first title of the first chapter: Millions Now Living Will Never Die. And they were going on teaching this truth for as long as until 1995. And for many years, from 1982, the Awake magazine until the month of November 8th, 1995, the Awake magazine, on a back cover, on the fourth page, on the first editions, there was on the back of the cover page, there was a little paragraph here, why Awake is published. And right on the bottom here, it says, wait a second, actually right here, and why right on the bottom here it says that this last generation of 1914 will see, to educate them, because they will see this the end of times. So until 95, this truth of generation of 1914 will not pass away was taught to the organization as a truth that came directly from God through the channel, the only channel that was the governing body, and Rutherford was part of that governing body. But that was until 95, and then in 1995, next month, there was November. Now we have also November, but this is Watchtower magazine, not Awake. So they stopped printing this in Awake. Now they in Watchtower magazine from the same month, November, we find this little paragraph. This is November 1st, 1995. On a page 16, we have this article, a time of keep away, a time to keep awake. And on the page 17, we find this paragraph that says, eager to see the end of this evil system, Jehovah's people have at time speculated about the time when the Great Tribulation would break out, even tying this to calculation of what is the lifetime of a generation since 1914. Rather than provide a rule for measuring time, the term generation, as used by Jesus, refers principally to contemporary people of certain historical period, with their identifying characteristics. So now the new light came, and they say that this new generation was totally different thing, because it wasn't about people living in our times, it was people living in the Jesus times. So that's totally different point of understanding. And then if we go to 2 years later, in also Watchtower magazine, we have also questions from readers in a magazine from June 1st, 1997, on a page 28. Questions from e-readers. We have this question. The Watchtower from November 1st, 1995, which we just looked at, focused on what Jesus said about this generation. As we read at Matthew 24:34, does this mean that there is some question about whether God's kingdom was set up in heaven in 1914? And they explain that this is not about that this is about this generation. That's not, about the kingdom. This is about the generation, and they give this explanation at the very end of this paragraph. They say, Jesus used the term generation, helping us to see that his usage was no basis for calculating or counting from 1914. how close to the end we are. So Mr. Rutherford had light that told him to calculate so we can know the time frame, but now we have a new light that we shouldn't calculate what is the time frame. So somehow after 77 years a new light came, that the generation is gone, since the generation is gone, because somehow the light didn't come before the generation was gone, like in the 60s, but somehow when there was no more generation almost, the new light came to find out the truth, so they changed the point of view because the new light of the truth came and was revealed that the prediction date or time frames is wrong and should not be made in the future, any frame time or date and the calculations for them. So question number 7 for you Jehovah Witnesses, I have this: why every new light of the truth always exposes old light of the truth as a false or untrue, instead of adding more brightness to the old truth? Because that's what it should do, add more brightness to the old truth. So why it is always proving false or untrue? The question number 8, very interesting, very interesting. We're gonna have some reading now. We are going to I actually titled this question a confession of Watchtower organization, of governing body. If we go to Watchtower magazine from 2013, from July 15, 2013. Oh, sorry, not a July. This is 2013. Yeah, July. Sorry, this is July 15, 2013. On page 3, we have this article. Tell us when will these things be? Tell us when these things be. And we have a little confession here done by the governing body. And so we read, I'll read just the highlighted parts of it. And I read this on page 3, and that will go till page 8. So we go, for a number of years, we thought that because we had the new light of the truth revealed to us by God, because we are the only channel of communication, and we reveal this truth to the organization because we are the only channel. So that's why for many years we taught this as a truth. Okay, so let's go there. This is paragraph 3 on page 3. For a number of years we taught that the Great Tribulation began in 1914 with World War I, and that those days were cut short by Jehovah in 1918. Thus, the Great Tribulation was taught to have 3 phases. There would be a beginning in 1914 to 1918. The tribulation would be interrupted from 1918 onward, and it would conclude at Armageddon. We also discerned that the first part of the Great Tribulation did not begin in 1914. Did not begin in 1914. Thus, the events that began in 1914 were not the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Again, thus, the events that began in 1914 were not the beginning of the Great Tribulation. We go further, we read on page 6. Previously, we taught that the judging of people as sheep or goats would take place during the entire period of the last days from 1914 onward. We concluded that those who rejected the kingdom message and who died before that start of the Great Tribulation would die as a goat without the hope of resurrection. We concluded that those who rejected the kingdom message and who died before the start of the Great Tribulation would die as goats without the hope of resurrection, because they previously taught that there would be a judgment, but there was not. And then we go on page 8, we read this. In the past, we have stated in our publication that these last 4 references apply to Jesus arriving or coming in 1918. We understood that the arriving man we understood that the arriving mentioned in verses 46 was linked to the time. This is 46 of Matthew 24. So one more time. We understood that the arriving mentioned in the verse 46 of Matthew 24 was linked to the time when Jesus came to inspect the spiritual condition of the anointed in 1918, and that the appointment of slave over all master belongings occurred in 1919. However, further consideration of Jesus' prophecy indicates that an adjustment in our understanding of the timing of certain aspects of Jesus' prophecy is needed. And it says, in review, what have we learned? Question and answer. In the beginning of this article, we raised 3 when questions. First, considered of the Great Tribulation did not begin in 1914, but will start when the United Nations attack Babylon the Great. Then we reviewed why Jesus' judgment of the sheep and the goats did not begin in 1914, but will occur during the Great Tribulation. Finally, we examined why Jesus' arrival to appoint the faithful slave over all belongings did not occur in 1919, but will take place during the Great Tribulation. So then all 3 whence apply to the same future time period, the Great Tribulation. So the old truth proved to be false truth. Now we have a new truth that is the true truth. So before I ask the question number 8, let me read this from Watchtower magazine from 1981, from December 1st. December 1st, 1981, on page 26, we find this article. Okay, and it says the path of the righteous does keep getting brighter. And on the next page, on the page 27, we find this. But Jehovah God has also provided his visible organization, his faithful and discreet slave, made up of spirit-anointed ones, to help Christians in all nations to understand and apply properly the Bible in their lives. Unless we are in truth with this channel of communication that God is using, we will not progress along the road of life, no matter how much Bible reading we do. So only the channel of communication, the anointed, faithful, discreet slave, is able to reveal the truth to the whole organization about the teaching of the Bible, as we just had an example in confessing that the truth that they revealed wasn't really truth. It was a lie. It wasn't truth. It was missed, a wrong understanding. But they have the light that God is giving them, the bright light, enlightenment of the truth that gets brighter, the truth gets brighter, the revelation that God gives them supposed to make the old truth brighter. So if they said that was 1914, now the brighter, I would mean, okay, next year that would be brighter, but saying it wasn't 14, it will be sometime in the future, is totally contradicting. My question for you, Jehovah Witnesses, is this, the question number 8. Since governing body is the only channel of communication with God to bring the truth to the organization, how is it possible that the truth which they teach for years turns out to be false and untruth by their own admission? Question number 9. This question doesn't need a background. This question needs one article in the Watchtower magazine. This is the Watchtower magazine from 1983. 1983, January 15. January 15, 1983, on the page 18, we have an article that is titled Exposing Devil's Subtle Designs. Okay. This is Watchtower, January 15, 1983. And we read this article, and on the page 22 and then page 27, we find actually very interesting statements, very interesting paragraph, and that reads, avoid independent thinking. Avoid independent thinking. And it explains why. Is no good for you. Independent thinking, no good. Only channel of communication with God is the only truth you need. You cannot think independently. And then on page 27, it says, fight against independent thinking. Fight against independent thinking, and I'll explain why. Because it's no good for you. The question number 9 I have for you, Jehovah Witnesses, is this. Why is it that Watchtower organization, the governing body, brainwashes you and train you to be completely dependent on them? Why is it they want you to depend on them completely? You answer. And the 10th question. This is very important question for you, Jehovah Witnesses. Why are you watching this video? This is forbidden by your organization. You can't watch it. Why are you watching?